From Montana's news leader, this is the MTN 10 o'clock news.
Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Russ Riesinger. Two enormous explosions shook Beirut, Lebanon today. More than 100 people are dead, more than 3,000 wounded, but the death toll has continued to rise by the hour. Lebanon's prime minister is vowing to hold responsible whoever is to blame for the explosions, and tonight President Trump said it was a bomb of some kind without giving any more details. Here's CBS's Chris Livesay.
Just after 7 p.m. local, the enormous explosion rocked the port city, sending shockwaves miles away at sea. The U.S. State Department is warning about toxic gases released in the blast, telling all to stay indoors. The source of the catastrophe? Explosive material seized years ago and stored at the port, according to the Lebanese government. But what sparked it is yet unknown. Terrorism has not been ruled out.
Houses, buildings, dead bodies in the streets, injuries. Hospitals couldn't accept more injuries and bodies because they were full. Beirut is a destroyed city. It is like a real war zone.
And tonight, the Prime Minister vowed that those responsible will pay the price. Chris Livesay, CBS News, Rome.
Well, here at home, July's spike in COVID cases now has Yellowstone County health leaders pleading with residents to change the game for August. At a news conference this afternoon, Yellowstone County Health Officer John FELTON said we saw 850 new cases in July, alarming numbers for health officials since we're only 3 weeks away from schools opening. FELTON says the key heading into the school year is to aggressively follow up on cases and contact trace. But just because there's a breakout of virus in the classroom doesn't mean a school will close.
August has an opportunity to be dramatically different than July, but it's really going to depend on everyone stepping up. I think what we should be very cognizant of as a community is that we're 3 weeks from sending kids back to schools. And 3 weeks is sufficient time to have a significant change in our status.
FELTON's working with school administrators in the county to draft a back-to-school plan. There will be one county-wide policy for all schools to adhere to when it comes to slowing the virus at school events and activities. FELTON hopes to unveil that plan before school starts. Across the state today, 82 new COVID-19 cases were reported in Montana. 15 of those new cases were in Bighorn County, which has seen 49 new cases already so far in August. Yellowstone County added 8 more. Prairie County registered its first case. This brings our state's total to more than 4,300 cases. More than 1,400 of those are active. The death toll remains at 64. Well, after decades of political wrangling, federal leaders are finally able to wrap up permanent financing of the Land and Water Conservation Fund. President Donald Trump signed legislation this morning. MTN's Dennis Bragg has been tracking this story and joins us now with more.
It was 35 years ago this month, President Reagan asked a special commission to find a permanent way to fund land and conservation programs. But the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which is paid for through revenues from oil and gas leasing, has continued to be a political football.
Now in a few short months, Congress was able to pull together bipartisan support for the Great American Outdoors Act. It not only permanently allocates money for the Land and Water Conservation Fund, but sets aside billions of dollars to catch up on maintenance and infrastructure projects on national parks and other federal lands.
The legislation I'm signing today builds on my administration's unwavering commitment to conserving and the grandeur and the splendor of God's creation. This is truly God's creation.
Politics aside, passage of the act is big news for Big Sky Country. In addition to pumping money into Montana's national parks, Forest Service, and BLM lands, the legislation provides future certainty for our state's legacy of public lands, paying for fishing access and trails, conservation, and recreation projects.
This is a big win for conservation. It's a big win for jobs. It's a big win for our Montana way of life. It's a big win for bipartisanship. And perhaps it's only fitting it took public lands to bring a divided government together.
We'll protect the Forest Service, our Fish and Wildlife Service, our wildlife refuges, our BLM grounds. This will work on our national parks. This will stop Congress from stealing the money that they have for decades and put it back into the national parks for generations to come.
Senator Daines tells me the money will be available immediately. It won't have to go through a politically charged appropriations process. Dennis Bragg, MTN News.
Well, Senator John Tester, who had introduced a bill for full funding of LWCF 11 years ago, calls the bill a big deal for the Treasure State's great treasure, our public lands. We want to remind you that this Saturday night here on Q2, Steve Daines and Steve Bullock will meet for their first U.S. Senate debate. It'll take place at 9 o'clock. MTN's chief political reporter Mike Dennison joins other Montana broadcasters for this pivotal event as you decide how to place your 2020 vote. Once again, Montana's first senatorial debate this Saturday night at 9 right here on Q2. All right, turning to Chief Forecaster Bob McGuire. We got a lot of rain last night. How are we standing so far?
Yeah, that was the big question today. How are we doing this year, and let's compare it to last year, see how we're doing. So we've found some totals, and this is what we found. Take a look at this. In the Billings area, as of today, we are at 9.37 inches. Last year on this date, we were at 11.90, so actually a little bit behind last year. Miles City, they're at 8.27. You'll notice last year on this date, they were at 9.89. And over in Livingston, they're not doing as well. They're at 7.17 inches of precipitation. Last year at this time, they were at 11.84. And over in Glasgow, they're at 8.97 inches of precipitation. Last year, they were actually a little bit below. So we're actually ahead. One place we're actually ahead of normal is Glasgow. Last year at this time, they were at 8.40 inches. And looks like we're going to be dry for tomorrow. And maybe after that, we could see some spotty showers again on Thursday. We'll chat about that coming up in a few more minutes. Russ?
All right, thank you, Bob. Fire crews have reached 100% containment now on the Falling Star fire that was burning north of Park City. Fire lines have been dug around the entire perimeter, and firefighters got some help from an inch of rain that fell in the area last night. Officials expect to see hot spots pop up over the next 2 days in the 2,200 acres of burned land. Local fire crews from Park City and Columbus will be monitoring the hot spots for the next couple of days. Well, a big plane landed here in Billings today, one of the largest in the entire world. This Russian Antonov aircraft will be transporting a helicopter to help fight fires in Indonesia. The Chinook helicopter is part of a fleet of aircraft owned by the Billings Flying Service. Co-president of the company, Gary Blaine, spoke with Q2 about their mission and everything they'll be taking with them.
We have a crew of firefighters. We're all heading to Indonesia. They're actually being proactive on fires. It's not for a specific fire, but Indonesia wants to be more in the game of large aircraft on fires, a little bit more like the United States. That helicopter is going in that plane with the crew. There's also a container, a sea container like the ships carry, and it's completely packed full of parts. Our guys have, they have a pretty good idea of what it takes to keep one of these running for a year. Everything from spare engines to gearboxes, oil, fluids, all of that kind of stuff, and it's all going with us, everything.
The Billings Flying Service will be in Indonesia helping to fight fires for the next year. They're set to leave here tomorrow. Still ahead on the MTN 10 o'clock news here on Q2, the heart of a warrior. We're going to meet an 8-month-old boy who's proving every day that strength has nothing to do with age. And in sports, batter up, the state AA Legion baseball tournament getting underway tomorrow at Dealer Park. We're going to hear from the Scarlets and the Royals in just a bit.